Gerard Felitti, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
To begin, Israel is alleging that 12 employees of a United Nations agency, UNRWA, were involved in the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack in Gaza. How serious are these allegations?
No, this is very serious, and actually it's a lot more than 12. 12 are the number that they've identified by name and face. Right now, they believe at least 190 UNWRA employees were involved to some extent with Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or other terrorist groups that carried out the October 7 atrocities. And this is absolutely terrifying.
Now, this UN agency has pushed back against those allegations, but following those allegations, the U.S. and other countries have cut off funding. Now, this has reignited debate over humanitarian aid that gets into Gaza. Where do you see all of this going?
Well, UNWRA is a very flawed institution. This is not the first time that we've heard that there are problems with what they do in Gaza and with the Palestinians. For many years, there have been allegations substantiated by evidence that they teach anti-Semitism in those schools, that they use examples, even in math problems, that are blatantly anti-Semitic and encourage jihad and encourage suicide attacks against the Israeli civilian population. This is what UNWRA has been doing. So it's not a surprise for anyone to see the number of people involved with this. Cutting funding is something that's happened before and will happen again.
On that note, Israel's foreign minister is calling for UNRWA's commissioner to resign following these allegations. Now, what steps are needed for the public's trust to be restored in agencies like this?
Well, quite frankly, I'm not even sure if it's possible to regain public trust after all of these allegations, but the United Nations needs to clean house. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of UNRWA, needs to go. We need to see systemic change within that organization, and quite frankly, we need UNRWA itself restructured. We don't need an organization that victimizes people by keeping them in victim status as refugees for generations. We need actual help for people on the ground, and that's not what UNRWA is set up to do.
Now, these allegations come as the World Court was hearing arguments of South Africa's accusations of Israel committing genocide in Gaza. Now, some are saying there is no such talk about genocide against Israel inside Gaza. What's your take on all of this?
No, that's exactly the problem. We're talking about Israel committing genocide, which is absurd, but the United Nations is ignoring, the World Court, the legal body of the United Nations, is ignoring the terrorist atrocities. This is a double standard unlike any we've seen in recent times. We really need to be addressing who the real victims are, and that's the Israeli civilian population.
And on that note, this does come as there are still over 100 hostages being held in Gaza. What do you see as the next steps here? Is it hostage release, ceasefire, a new governing body in Gaza?
Well, all of the above. We have seen active negotiations moderated in Qatar to have the hostages released in an exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. We do expect that there will be some agreement on a humanitarian pause, but ultimately the only way to end this crisis, to end this war, is regime change. Hamas needs to go.
And what steps are needed to move that forward?
You know, in part militarily, and Israel's been doing a great job degrading Hamas's ability to continue carrying out the war, but we also need international pressure. The Palestinian people, all people, they can't live under dictatorship, under Islamist regimes that want to do as much damage to their own people as to others. So there needs to be a fundamental pressure for change from other Arab countries as well, and to delegitimize Hamas, to no longer treat it as a legitimate organ of anything, and instead consider it as the terrorist organization it is.
And how do you see all the pro-Palestinian protests we're seeing around the world fitting into that?
Well, that's a narrative that is going hand in hand with the accusations of genocide. We're seeing this violent rhetoric against Jews that has been with us for a long time. The problem is this rhetoric is only making things worse. We need steadfast leadership. We need clarity, and we need to make it clear that this is nothing but naked support for terrorist violence. This is not humanitarian pro-Palestinian sympathizers. These are people who want to create a violent environment in Israel and around the world, and we need to stand united against them.
Gerard Felitti, thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.